Yeah.
Loud and clear. My name is Jim Ruley. I'm with the Health and Wellness Committee here in Amberley Village. It's actually called the We Thrive Health and Wellness Committee, and that little term on the front of it, We Thrive, is important because it means we are part of the Hamilton County Public Health system. They help us quite a bit with resources. As a matter of fact, they put us in touch with the Alzheimer's organization and the woman who's going to be speaking to you tonight about Alzheimer's. So it's things like that that We Thrive helps us with. We're a small but mighty committee. Dan Ketcha sitting in the middle of the room there. Dan is part of our group. Dara is our council member and member of our team. Again, I'm Jim Ruley, and we're looking for help. So if you would consider the Health and Wellness Committee, there's a flyer over on the table. My contact information is on it. Please consider helping us out. We're looking for ideas for more presentations down the road. We also, by the way, sponsor pickleball and yoga on the lawn as two of our other activities that we are doing ongoing. And Dan has organized the food drive that you will see at the Ice Cream Social for the second year in a row. So we're trying to do as many things in the health and wellness categories. And if you're interested, we could use your help. So please give me a call and contact us if you are interested. With that, I want to turn it over to Kelsey, and let's get started.
Thanks, Jim. All right, good evening, everyone. Thanks for being here. I think the heat may have chased some people off. I will not make you go outside, so hopefully we can have some snacks and enjoy the air conditioning. But thanks for being here and thanks for having me. As Jim mentioned, the Wellness Committee is looking for other topics. There were some great suggestions on kind of general aging and some other things. So please, if you're inspired by these sessions and you're curious about other topics around aging well for yourself, your neighbors, your loved ones, please make sure to let one of the committee members know, because I know they're looking for ways that they can tap in some other experts for keeping the education going. So tonight we're going to be talking about communication as it relates to supporting someone and connecting with someone who has Alzheimer's or another form of dementia. So what we're going to talk about today is you'll have kind of an abbreviated version of all the top talking points that we're going to cover today in this brochure. So if you didn't get one, there are some on the back table, and I put some up on the front table as well. So make sure you grab one of those, and feel free to take some extras if you have friends or loved ones who would enjoy this information as well. So if you haven't joined us previously, I feel like I recognize a lot of familiar faces, but my name is Kelsey Nyheiser. I'm with the Alzheimer's Association. I'm a program manager for Hamilton County, and I work with We Thrive and any committees who are willing to bring us in and talk about Alzheimer's and dementia and aging. So let's just jump right in. I'm going to try and keep myself on time to talk for about 30-ish minutes. Hopefully I don't ramble too much, and then I'm going to turn it over to Officer Perry, aka Chris, who's going to talk about first responder communication and kind of how to prepare and how to communicate your needs in the case of an emergency. Okay, so when we're talking about effective communication strategies, the way we're going to look at this is really talking about ways that we can approach communication with people with dementia throughout the various stages of the disease. So we're really going to look at it from the perspective of the early stages of Alzheimer's or dementia, the middle, and the late stages, and kind of how we can use all five senses to continue to connect with someone. So first, we're going to really talk about the communication changes that happen throughout the course of the disease. So I know in previous sessions I've mentioned that Alzheimer's does not affect any individual the exact same way. Everyone has a different experience and shows symptoms and signs a little differently. So you're going to continue to hear me use words like typically and commonly when we think about these common scenarios. Some of these, if you're supporting someone living with dementia, or you have a loved one who has dementia, some of this might feel familiar to you, or some of the examples that we're going to talk about might be things that you've navigated yourself. So what we're really going to look at is how do we kind of put on our detective hats and decode some of the messages that we might be receiving from someone living with dementia, because we'll notice as the disease progresses that they are going to be communicating with you in ways that don't include their words oftentimes, especially as they go into the later stages. So we're going to talk about what you might see as the disease progresses and what are the best ways for you to respond. How can we make sure that we have the most positive interaction possible? And we're going to identify some of those strategies for how we can continue to connect at every stage. So when I use the word communication, I think we oftentimes go to verbal communication first, right? But when we think about communication, there are a lot of ways that we can send a message, that we can get a message across. So if I'm standing up here like this, and I'm telling you with my words that I'm really excited to be here. I love the heat. I love traffic, and I'm just so happy to spend the next hour with you all. Do you believe what I'm telling you? Why not?
Your arms are crossed.
My voice, yeah, so my tone, my arms are crossed.
There's no connection.
There's no connection, right? I'm kind of rolling my eyes, I'm looking around, I'm using a very deadpan tone.
You know, I stand like this frequently because
Uh-huh.
it's comfortable.
Yeah.
I know that this is supposed to be that I'm not listening, but I don't believe that that's always what it means.
Yeah, sometimes it means that this is a good place to put my arms.
It's comfortable.
Yeah, it's comfortable. That's okay too.
Yes.
But sometimes it can be received if it's included with, your tapping your
With the
foot
other stuff,
or
right.
your tone or your facial expression that
Right, but no.
don't talk to me. I don't want to be here, right?
Yeah.
So we know that, and I talk about this when we do communication trainings with teenagers, that there are a lot of different ways that we can communicate what we're trying to say beyond what we're saying with our words. So this is going to be included here in the context of everything we're going to be talking about when we're talking about communication and dementia. So when we break this apart between the 3 different stages of the disease, we're going to talk about that early mild, that middle moderate, and then the late severe stages. So in this early stage, what I tell people when they come to, let's say, one of our memory cafes, right? These are the fun activities that we do out in the community where a caregiver and their loved one with dementia can go to a pizza parlor and socialize and, play bingo. When we do these activities, you might show up and not realize who is there living with dementia and who is the caregiver, who is the spouse. In the early stages, especially when you first meet someone, they might be, we're all kind of on our best behavior when we meet someone new. Same goes with someone with dementia. So they might have their kind of best manners on. You might not be able to tell at all who has dementia. So they're still able to communicate their thoughts, their feelings, their emotions using their words, using their language. So it can be harder to tell in that early stage if this is someone living with Alzheimer's or dementia. In a longer conversation, you might start to notice some of those warning signs we talked about last time. So you might notice that someone's going to start repeating themselves, or maybe they're going to ask you the same question again. They might also have a harder time. I tend to use too much sarcasm, and I've had to catch myself a couple times at these programs. I say something sarcastic, and I see the moment when I lose someone, when their eyes I can tell that they're not following what I'm saying. So it gets easier here in the early stages because, you're having a conversation with someone and it feels like a conversation you'd be having with anyone, right? You can kind of lose sight of the fact that this person's living with a form of dementia. You bust out your sarcasm and they might misinterpret what you're trying to say, or they might be unable to kind of follow a conversation. So you'll start to notice over a prolonged period of time that there is something happening here. In the middle stages, the moderate stage, you're going to notice someone probably using more basic words and sentences. So we talked a little bit last time about word searching. You might see someone start to rely on more basic words or kind of filler words when they can't find the word that they're looking for. They might also try and kind of bring you on a journey with them to find the word. They might say, oh, that thing with the buttons that turns the TV on, right? That word remote isn't coming to their mind. So they might start to really rely on other ways, pointing, facial expressions, all these other ways that they might communicate through their body language to tell you what they're trying to reach. doesn't mean that someone, as they're experiencing this change in their communication, that they still don't need emotional connection and meaning. So what we never want to see, you know, someone's living with a diagnosis, maybe they have a recent diagnosis, that does not mean that person should stay home because they get easily confused. It doesn't mean that we want them, you know, watching Jeopardy all day long. This person still needs meaning in their life, they still need purpose. We want to make sure in everything that we're doing when we're talking about communication and support for someone with dementia, we want to keep them safe first, and we want them to be happy. So those are our two goals at any given time. So we want to make sure that they're still engaged, that they're still socializing, and that they're still finding meaning. So they can do activities, they can have hobbies, they can participate, but we want to make sure it's in ways that meets them where they are and keeps them safe. In the late stages, we're going to notice that someone is mostly nonverbal, so they're not going to be able to use their words to communicate needs with you. This is especially when you're going to need to look for other types of clues, and we'll get into that in a little bit. They might still respond to, you know, it's on a case-by-case basis. Someone might recognize certain people that they knew previously. They might respond to familiar words or songs. This is where music can play a big part in helping with someone's mood, because they can still respond to some things that might be familiar, but they're really going to be relying on the five senses to connect. And this is where they're probably going to be using a lot of body language and expression to try and communicate with you. So some changes you may notice, we're going to dig a little bit deeper into each stage. So in the early stage, someone's going to have difficulty finding some of those right words. This is someone I know we've talked about before, that we want to still honor someone's dignity and treat them with respect. Even in a moment where someone's executive functioning is being impacted, some of their behaviors might feel very childlike or silly or inappropriate. This is their brain, you know, degenerating. They are not intentionally trying to hurt you. They're not trying to cause a scene or upset someone. So we want to make sure that we can kind of follow them along. In the early stages, they still have the ability to make some decisions. Larger decisions might start to get more complicated, but we want to still find moments when this person can be treated with dignity and have some agency. So let's give them some choice. Something you can do here is ask them if you're noticing someone struggling to find their words, or they're struggling to communicate with you what they're trying to say, and you think you kind of know what they're saying. Ask if you can help them. You know, I think I know what you're trying to say. Can I help you finish that sentence? Can I help you find that word? Or can I just sit here and be patient? I'm not in a hurry. You take your time. Let them know that you're there to listen. It can feel grueling to sit quietly for 5 seconds, but just be patient. We want to make sure we're not making anyone feel rushed. That'll probably lead to more frustration. So they're probably going to take longer to speak or respond. They're trying to do all of that work cognitively to come up with appropriate, responses and to understand and process what you're saying. Because of all the confusion, and we talked about this with those warning signs, the confusion, the frustration that can happen, we might also see someone start to withdraw from conversations. So they might just start taking themselves out of a situation that's making them uncomfortable or that's making them confused. So we want to make sure, again, that we're keeping them engaged. Maybe that means that they shouldn't be in, going to bridge club where there are 30 people, or bingo where it's a big, loud group of people getting together, having fun. That might be overwhelming and overstimulating for them, but can they still, have lunch with 5 people? What is the setting that they're going to be comfortable with? And you can kind of talk with them and read some of those signs as well. They're going to start struggling with decision making or problem solving. This is where you can start to kind of get angry or upset with someone, that we are not pushing them aside and saying, Judy did not take your slippers, chill out. If I thought that someone stole something from me, I would be really ticked off. I would be really upset, and I would want to let someone know. So what we want to make sure we're doing with this loved one who is expressing this emotion is that we want to make sure that they feel heard. They want to be seen or heard. They want to feel validated. So we want to make sure that we're meeting them where they are. Okay, let's talk about what did Judy do? She took your slippers. Well, if I thought someone took my slippers, I would be really upset too. Do you remember where you left them? Okay. I'm gonna step out and I'm gonna go talk to someone and see if we can locate your slippers. You know, whatever it takes to kind of let them know that they are being heard and that you are helping them find that solution. After that they have felt like they have been heard and that you are there to help them, we can kind of move forward and probably redirect the conversation so that we can move away from whatever they were fixated on that was upsetting them. Maybe we can move on to an activity or music, something that changes their mood and gets them feeling better. You know, maybe Elvis is their favorite musician and turning on Elvis clears the deck. So let's kind of redirect and turn on some Elvis. But we want to make sure that we're responding to the emotions behind whatever they're telling you versus fixating on, is that real? Is that a fact? Is that reality? We want to make sure that we're kind of joining them where they are. So we want to use short sentences, basic words, speak slowly and clearly, ask that person one question at a time. Don't do what I do where I wrap them all together and don't give time for response. We want to make sure we're limiting distractions. So if you're visiting a friend with dementia for lunch, it might be overstimulating for them to figure out and navigate eating their lunch while also listening to music, or maybe the TV's on. Maybe turn off those other distractions so they can really focus. And make sure that we're being patient. You know, we want to kind of, again, we're playing detective. We're paying attention to what we might be seeing beyond what they're able to tell us with their words. And if they're, you know, having a hard time with words, we can kind of fill in and help them if they're open to that. So when we're trying to connect, we want to use visual clues. We can use our gestures. We can point. We want to make sure we're avoiding sudden movement. So again, Chris, don't go sneaking up on me because you're going to get probably a right hook. My left is not my dominant. We can write things down for the person. You can put your answers into your questions. You can repeat statements if you're noticing that they're not really following along. And we want to make sure that we're not honing in on what they're not able to do, right? No one wants to have everything that they're struggling with or that's hard for them pointed out. So let's take moments to celebrate what they can do and avoid critiquing and quizzing them, right? We don't want to make them feel like they're showing up for a surprise pop quiz. So we want to respond empathetically. We want to reassure them, make sure that they feel heard. We want to focus on the feelings over the facts. And again, once they feel like they've been seen and heard, we can validate and then redirect. You know, turn on that Elvis. So moving into the late stage, things that you might notice. So communication here, again, is going to be very few words, if any at all. You might notice them respond with their facial expressions or smile or nod to familiar things. You want to make sure when we're thinking about our safety, our happiness here, our safe and happy person, that we are listening and paying attention to any expressions of pain. So let's say someone has, is what appears to be throwing a fit or getting really upset at the idea of putting their shoes on. Why might they not want to put their shoes on? What could be going on? What kind of discomfort might they be in? Is there, you know, a blister on their foot? Do they have some ingrown toenails? Is there something happening that could be causing that discomfort that is really leading to that behavior of them, you know, flipping out and not wanting to put their shoes on? So let's think about what might be happening. Are they appearing irritated? Are they, you know, tugging at their clothes? Are they itching? Might they be hot? Can we adjust the thermostat? Can we, you know, help them take off an outer layer of clothing? You know, what kind of things can we notice? So again, we want to focus on that safety, that happiness. We want to keep talking. So this is where you're gonna, not only are you a detective, but you're an improv star. So you might really start to have some conversations that feel one-sided. You might start to kind of tell stories. They're not going to be super responsive verbally, but you might notice that they're responding with, you know, their facial expressions for what you're saying. So you're just going to have to kind of figure out what they're responding well to, what maybe to avoid next time. And this is where you can really start to use the senses beyond your words to talk about ways to connect. So each of the next few slides just really talks about each of those senses. So Are we noticing that someone is super tactile? How can we incorporate touch into the way that we're communicating? You know, I think a hand massage with some lotion sounds great. If this is someone who used to garden, maybe lavender, maybe it's someone who used to cook, can we incorporate some vanilla or smells that they really like, things that relax them? Maybe bringing in a therapeutic pet, an animal that they can play with, or pets, sculpting with non-toxic materials, or even just kind of applying some human touch. You know, maybe that's something that's important to them, holding their hand or resting your hand on their back. Can be helpful, or braiding their hair. So when we're thinking about sight, you know, I think everyone loves a cat video, even if we're allergic. Maybe they used to love nature or travel. Think about the hobbies and the things that this person likes, and think about ways you can use that to think about different activities. Maybe you're looking at old photographs and they can start to perk up when they see some of those photographs. Bird watching is a good one. You don't even have to leave the person's room. You can have a bird feeder or something right outside the window that helps to bring in some animals that they can watch. Maybe it's painting with watercolors, or, you know, going outdoors and sitting on a bench or by an open window to kind of watch nature. I mentioned music before. Maybe it's also recordings of sounds from nature, or maybe the animals are important to them, or city life, maybe musical instruments. We can do books, poetry, that way you're not just hearing yourself talk. You can read scripture to them, newspaper articles. Just sometimes that gentle tone of another person's voice can be really soothing. Sometimes my husband will be like, can I read you this page out of this book? And we're in bed and I pass out within 2 minutes. So it can be something that's really soothing for people. When we think about smell, again, think about that individual. If they were a big avid cook or a gardener, or they just love food, we can take those like herbs or spices into account, or maybe it's flowers, teas, coffee beans. Just think about those things that would be kind of stimulating and exciting using smell. Those fragrant lotions for those hand massages, or even just cooking that individual some of their favorite foods. And then through taste, again with the favorite foods. You'll notice that most of what I talk about is food related. Home-baked goodies, popsicles, especially in the later stages where chewing and swallowing can be more difficult. Sometimes yogurts or puddings or smoothies can be really helpful, especially with someone who is having a harder time getting all their nutrients or eating certain things. We can incorporate that into different ice creams, puddings, smoothies, or flavored drinks. So when we think about, this is where we're going to wrap up, and I'm going to turn it over to Chris. Communication in all stages of the disease. What we're really talking about here is joining that person's reality to connect. We want to really focus on and understand, like, okay, here are the things that have happened that I cannot change, and here are the things that I can help and contribute to, and the things that I can change today. You know, how can I do my part to see if we can have a good day together and have a good experience? We want to keep in mind that although we know that there are things happening that to this person that makes their behavior feel very childlike at times, that they still retain a sense of self despite what's happening to them through this disease. So we want to keep that in mind in the way that we're interacting with them and the way that we're connecting with them. We want to treat them as an adult. Try your best to decode a person's communications. And you might notice that today was a really bad day. I forgot everything that Kelsey told me at that program, and I went in too fast, too hot. I was in a hurry, I had my arms crossed, I didn't make eye contact, and they cussed me out of the room. And maybe they did. We have all been in positions where we don't do it right. So it's okay, where you're gonna do the best you can with what resources you have at any given time. And that person, you know, can have a totally different day tomorrow or a totally different afternoon. So you can always, you know, excuse yourself, go check on something, leave the room, and give yourself an opportunity to reset and return. Or maybe come back tomorrow and have a totally different experience. Make sure that you're recognizing the effects of what your mood and your actions can do in these situations, and make sure that you can do your part to help, you know, meet their needs while staying soothing and calming with that person. Okay, I think we're going to pivot over to Chris and talk about some first responder communication and tips And then we can wrap up with questions.
So I think everybody probably knows me, but I'm Chris Berry, your Senior Citizen Resource Officer. 31 years of law enforcement experience. I came from Cincinnati PD after 26 years. And these are safety tips for seniors, especially when calling 911. Clearly give your name and address, the name of the person in need of help in relationship to that person. It's really important you let us know if that is not someone you know, so we know what kind of approach we're going to have. A brief description of the person, sex, race, height, weight, hair and eye color, and a clothing description. If this involves somebody with dementia and they're wandering, a really good description of their clothing, and if they have a specific item that they wear all the time, like blue hat, red hat, or they always wear a trench coat or something like that that'll stick out real easy. Tell the 911 call taker if the person you're calling about has a mental health condition or dementia-related issues. That way we can get somebody there that has specific training for dementia, like the dementia training for first responders that we do. Have a list of the medication the person is currently taking. We always kept a list of my mom's medication on the freezer or the refrigerator. Tell the 911 call taker if there's any history of violence associated with this person. Because the person has dementia, it doesn't mean that they can't be violent. My mom would get violent at times, primarily because she would hallucinate. And that would definitely be an issue that the police would want to be advised of. Are there any weapons involved, and if so, what type of weapon? And how is the person currently behaving, and what are they saying? Those are things that are extremely important for the proper response. Upon the arrival of the first responders, if you can, have all the lights turned on inside and outside. Identify yourself as the person that called 911. Be clear and to the point. If this is a mental health issue, ask the first responders if they have someone trained in crisis intervention training, which is commonly referred to as CIT training. If this is an issue related to dementia, ask the first responders if they have somebody trained in dementia of Alzheimer's, which is the dementia training for first responders that we do. Answer any questions the first responders give you. Only give the facts and be brief with your answers. Understand that the first responders may ask questions that you have already answered. For the 911 call taker, the first responders may not have received all the information from the dispatcher before their arrival. So if I was on another call and I hear this call come out to 123 Main Street, maybe I'm taking a crash report. Well, I hear that address come out and I'm thinking, well, I'm just right around the corner, I'll stop. They may not know any of what's going on. They may have been on another radio channel, so when they come up, it's going to be annoying that you're repeating yourself so many times, but they may not know. It's not that they're not paying attention, it's just they may not have been aware of how the run was broadcast. Be patient and don't interfere with the first responders as they're actively working. So the connect and communicate strategies, these are all things I learned from dealing with my mom through her dementia. I had to pay attention to my body language and my emotions, and I would stop over after work, and I would be in uniform. Well, there's a specific way that police officers see it all the time, the way they stand. If they have the external vest carrier, they have their hands like this, or you stand there with your hands on your gun belt. Those things would set my mom off. I don't know why. She lived with it her whole life. My dad was a police officer, but those are things I had to really make sure that I didn't do. My facial expression was another one. I don't ever really have a real happy expression. That doesn't mean I'm not happy, but my mom didn't like it at all. She always told me to smile. So I failed at that one miserably. Be sure to include the person when telling a story. I would see people come and visit, and they would talk around my mom, and that never ended well at all. And they would say things like, so my mom's name was Sharon. They would say, can Sharon do this? Sharon's right there. And I mean, I would take offense to it. I think she's right there. Why don't you talk to her like she's a human? But I mean, people make mistakes, and I understand it. Speak calmly and use simple words when speaking to them. Use the same words each time you answer a question from them. Be consistent with your instructions. And that's another thing. I would have to keep repeating things. But I had to be patient. Now my sister couldn't manage this. She was not she was not good with this. When having a conversation with multiple people present, especially like at holidays and Thanksgiving, one person speaks at a time, because if everybody was sitting at the table and they were all talking, she couldn't focus on anything. She would shut down, and it was terrible to watch her get that frustrated. If someone is arguing with your person, ask them to leave the area. This was my sister. Arguing will never be productive and will only make the situation worse. So I had to kind of be diplomatic about it and tell my sister, like, you've got to go to another room. But my sister couldn't accept that my mom had dementia. It was like there was a stigma for my sister. There wasn't for the rest of us, but she had a problem with it, so she tried to avoid the issue and talk to my mom like she always was, which never worked out in any way, shape, or form. It made everything much, much worse. While monitoring your body language, also pay attention to your tone of voice. Anytime you had frustration in your voice, my mom would pick up on it. She could read it. And then my mom would get upset about it, and then we'd have a mess on our hands that we really couldn't get through, and then my dad would have to stay with my mom for the rest of the night while she was in that state. Your body language and tone of voice can speak a lot louder than your words do. Your body language may also be mirrored by the person with dementia. Keep in mind, what may seem incredibly simple to you is anything but simple to the person suffering with dementia. Finding the car keys, going to the grocery store, it's very frustrating. And when it first started, you're thinking, why can she not figure this out? Then you start to realize it's very sad. It's a hard thing to get through, but you have to keep in mind that this isn't simple for them. When I would go visit my mom, there were times when I'd look at her and I know that she didn't recognize me. She'd see a policeman in uniform walk in the house. So I started walking in the house and I'd say, "Mom, how are you?" Call her mom. Then she would realize, oh, okay, that's my son, or I'm mom to him. So it made it better for everybody. And I can tell you that was the first couple months of her not recognizing me it ripped my heart out. It tore me apart. So calling her mom actually helped me a lot too, because we were able to avoid all that mystery as to who I was. Like I said, this technique helped me emotionally. It was just an incredibly hard time for me to get through. So the communication changes. I went from having a kind, caring, and loving mom to cold, mean, and hurtful. And I had to recognize the fact that that was not my mom, that was the disease. But seeing that change is devastating to everybody that's involved. I had to make sure that everybody in our family, and myself especially, that those words weren't intentional and they were not personal. It's okay to feel the emotions that are felt when you hear these hurtful things, but just remember that's not them, that's not them talking. Seeing a therapist is something that I personally encourage you to do when going through this experience. You don't have to do it alone. Seek out the resources that are available to you and take care of yourself first, because if you can't take care of yourself, you're not going to be able to help these people. Decoding verbal behavioral messages. When coming into contact with the public in restaurants or other public spaces, don't hesitate to let people know that your person is suffering from dementia, that they are cognitively impaired. Some of the things my mom would say to people in the restaurant or staff, it could go really sideways, and you'd have to quickly tell them that she's not okay.
How do you do that without?
We supply cards.
Ah.
So I have some with me if anyone would like to see them or take some. But on the one side is just a Alzheimer's Association business card. On the back side it has, we call them the My Companion cards, because it has a little message about my companion has dementia. Thank you for your patience. So yeah, I can show you those.
Those cards would have been so useful.
Yeah, or like
For
at
us.
the airport, there are so many places where it just helps to have them aware.
Like, if you guys remember the last time when I told a story about how my mom would get upset in the plane when there was turbulence and she'd scream, "We're going down," one of those cards would have been really great at that time. It was terrible. But you can diffuse a bad situation right away with one of those cards, or just being out with it. You know, anytime you come in contact with a first responder, let the first responder know immediately that this person has dementia or cognitive decline. It explains a lot of the behavior that the police officer may be seeing. You know, it was really awkward at first and somewhat embarrassing because the stigma was really strong for us when my mom first got sick. But once we started telling people what was going on, it was for everybody's safety. And I kind of brushed the stigma aside, just like I do about talking about mental health issues. It's the safety and the awareness is so much bigger than the stigma that's associated with it. So it was easy to get by once I started looking at it that way. To best take care of your person, you must take care of yourself. Ask for help, give yourself some grace. Prioritize your mental health, and do not hesitate to see a therapist. Go ahead.
No, finish and then
I saw a therapist for post-traumatic stress disorder. I went back after I went through the last riots when I was in Cincinnati. After my friend died from brain cancer, I went back to talk it out. Why would I not do that? It's maintenance, and you're going to get yourself in a really good place. You don't have to do this stuff alone. So go ahead.
So, for the caregiver, or the family, or whatever, to see a therapist is good. Is it also helpful for the person who has dementia to see a therapist to deal with it?
We never did that, but I don't know how that would work.
I mean, I think it would depend on the individual, and there are neuropsychologists who do a little bit of, not to break it down this easily, but you have like the neurologist piece, and then you would have some of the like psychology and the behavioral and just kind of supporting the emotional weight of what they're going through. So there are some specialists who could do a little bit of both, but I think again, like anything that could help any individual, including the person with that diagnosis.
It would be very hard for them knowing that, oh, I'm being nasty to somebody or something, this isn't me.
Yeah, but even just in those early stages, we were talking about denial earlier, just kind of understanding like that acceptance piece and kind of what to do with that diagnosis.
My mom constantly denied the fact that anything was going on. I mean, and I totally understand that. But it was very clear to us, but there was something wrong with us according to her. So that's a game that you kind of had to play and keep things somewhat.
What is that? The denial, what caused them to kidnap?
I have no idea. I think she was embarrassed because she could see that she wasn't able to do things she used to do. If she would mess up on a recipe or burn something, it wasn't her fault. It was everybody else's fault. It wasn't her. There was nothing wrong with her. Even though we had told her, like, maybe it's time to stop cooking, or maybe it's time to stop this, stop driving. It was a fight. But she never said, okay, I understand something's going on. Maybe she was trying to protect us. I don't know. So if anybody is experiencing these things and they want to vent, get it off your chest. Call me. I've been through it. Been through a lot of different things, and I'm more than willing to help you. And we'll sit down and talk. You can call me on the phone, send me an email. It doesn't matter. I'm always available for you. So this is my contact information. If you need anything, please don't hesitate to ask. You guys have any questions?
I do. I have a question. Are there, I live alone, and I've dealt with somebody that had brain tumor. But I know that I'm not the person I was, and I can't do the things I used to do. How does one go about testing themselves to see if they're totally there? Are there self-tests or?
There are different levels of assessment, so I would say, I mean, maybe a self-test, but I would probably recommend going to a professional who could give you an assessment, and some of them, like at the earlier stages, could be, not earlier stages in that sense, but when you're looking for a very basic assessment, there are some that can happen with your annual physical, for example, with your general physician. And if they notice something in that assessment, some of them are, you know, the traditional pencil and paper style assessment. But if they're noticing something that is concerning to them, they can then kind of pass you along and recommend a more thorough assessment and get to the point where maybe they're gonna recommend a brain scan and some imaging. So it kind of depends on where that professional might find your leaning in your assessment to see if they would recommend further testing for you. So I would probably recommend starting with something on that more basic level with your doctor and kind of going from there.
I think with the Medicare assessment that they do.
Yes.
And they just, you know, I just had one, and I said, you know, I don't remember people's names all the time. And she said, no, that's common. What's your name?
I'm terrible with
Yeah,
names.
right.
So yeah, I mean, it depends on kind of where you are, where an individual's kind of baseline is. If you're noticing a change from where you used to be, if you were always a whiz with people's names and now you're noticing a bit of a decline, you know, that might be different, but it just kind of depends on the individual.
So one of the things I found helpful recently is I started to notice that I wasn't as sharp as I used to be. I've had a lot of head injuries and one traumatic brain injury, and you know, I'm going to be 53, so
Maybe.
I got a lot of miles on me though. So I started doing like crossword puzzles and brain games, and things are starting to come back online. But I wasn't exercising that part of my brain. So now I started doing that, and my focus is a lot better, and I am actually starting to remember people's names, because it's so awkward to walk in a room and say, "Hi, buddy," or my wife says, "Why didn't you introduce me to this person?" And I say, "Well, it's because I have no idea what their name is." And
You have to have an arrangement, you know,
Uh-huh.
where she says, I'm gonna introduce myself, and then you won't have to know the person's name.
she
Jane, and the other person's like, I don't know.
Yeah.
she picks up my slack pretty good like that. So
Yeah.
she's always saving me from something.
That's what it's about.
Yeah.
I will say too, that, so you mentioned the cognitive, the brain games. So your cognitive reserve, right? We talked about this during our first session back in, was that March? When we did healthy living, when we talked about those healthy habits.
March
But
or
it's kind of a, you use it or you lose it kind of thing. So you want to make sure you're doing those regular cognitive exercises. You want to be mindful of your diet. You want to do your physical exercise, keep up with your pickleball, hopefully when the temperatures drop back down a little bit. And sleep is really incredibly important. Make sure that you're getting solid night of sleep as best you can. What am I missing?
So I know it's not affordable, but have you heard of ETMS?
Mm-hmm.
The electric stimulation, that is amazing. I just went through 20 sessions of that.
Did you